Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Unwritten with Thomas Malpass, where we talk about stories of finding more purpose, living more passionately, and living a more peaceful everyday life. In today's episode, I speak with Victoria Pelletier, who is a true leader in the C-suite world. She's triumphed over adversity since the day she was born, literally. From childhood struggles to breaking barriers in the executive world at a very, very young age of 24 until this day, 20 years later, Victoria's journey is one of pure resilience and empowerment. We explore themes of feminism, diversity in the workplace, the pursuit of your passions while remaining professional, and all while uncovering the unwritten chapters of her unbelievable story. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode. Victoria Pelletier, everybody. And don't forget to subscribe. Enjoy. Welcome to the Unwritten Podcast with your host, Thomas Malpass, where we are on a mission to help the world find more purpose, passion, and peace in their everyday lives. Through deep conversations and connection, tune in because we are all on this journey of life together. Take us back and share some experiences growing up that shaped your journey and who you are today.
Well, I hate to start the show off on a sad note, but you've asked me to take you back. And I actually think my first few years of my life are pretty consequential in forming, the woman that's in front of you now. I actually, attribute it to being a big part of my why, my drive, my purpose. And so I'm born to a drug addicted teenage mother who is exceptionally abusive to me, from being pushed upstairs, downstairs, carelessness. It wasn't intentional, but cigarette in my eye. So I wore a patch for months. Was in and out of the child welfare system a few times before being fortunate to be adopted out of the situation. And that's because my biological mother, Julie, met a couple who she would often give me to after one of the episodes. And after several of these times, my mom, the woman who later adopted me, asked to take me from Julie and adopt me. And so, very selfless thing that Julie agreed to do, probably the most selfless thing she could have done. And certainly to that point, the best thing for me in my life. But that's a big part, as I said, of like what's, caused me to grow. I mean, I was a hardened child, scarred literally and figuratively, had walls up for a long time, to protect myself, fear of rejection, fear of being hurt, all of those things. But I think there's a little bit of like in my DNA, fight or flight, like I'm a fighter. And so
Yeah.
that coupled, and then there was tons of adversity that came, after that in my childhood to my teens to even just in the work world that I've had to deal with, and all of that's caused me to be exceptionally resilient, and live this sort of unstoppable life. That's a phrase I sign most of my social media posts with: unstoppable. The other's no excuses, and that's just because I will not let trauma, adversity, challenge, obstacles prevent me from getting whatever goal or objective I've set for myself.
Man, that is inspiring. Uh, so you said your mom was drug abusive and physically abusive, and where was your dad at?
So my biological father was not around, although
Oh,
Julie, my bio mom, had a boyfriend that was with us, and um, I've looked up through like Ancestry and 23andMe or whatever. I was never sure that the name that was on my birth certificate was like did she know really? Like, I think she was fairly sexually promiscuous. Like, did she know? So actually, the good news is the last name shows up everywhere. So I think she got that one right. But I think he might have passed away. So I've never met him. And I really only had a desire to meet him to learn a little bit more medically around my history.
Oh wow.
My parents are those
So
that
he just
actually,
wasn't.
no,
He just
he
wasn't
wasn't
around.
around. And for me, my parents are the two that adopted me and raised me.
Oh wow. And how's your uh is your mom still around?
Both mothers passed away. So Julie, I mean, she would check in occasionally with my mother on me, but and so I found out when I was 11 that she landed herself in jail for stabbing someone, and
Oh wow.
came out of jail and went into um, I think she was in Narcotics Anonymous, something, met a man there who she later married, but they were both in NA, I think, or AA, one of the two, I don't know. And she had contracted HIV from either her drug use or, again, sexual promiscuity, not sure. And so she passed away when I was pregnant with my younger child. I have two, 23 and 19, from complications from AIDS. And my mom, the woman that raised me, my adoptive mother, passed away months later. She was just a very unhealthy, smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day. She ate poorly.
Your
So
adopted mom.
yeah, yeah. So so both of them have passed away. So I don't really have much family at all. No real. I'm the only child, so no real extended
Oh
family.
wow.
Mm.
That's a pretty interesting story, to be honest.
Yeah, that's just the start of it. Yes.
And the fact that you've like built, I guess, a great life in your eyes. Do you feel good about where you are now?
I do. My vision for what success would look like has evolved tremendously over the years. So when I say that, my early years or my why, and like I started working
Mm-hmm.
very young. So my adoptive parents were not very well off. I mean, I never had to worry about going hungry, and I had clothing, but there was not money for much else. Like we didn't go on vacations. I didn't get, I remember, even, this will age me, I know you're a lot younger than me, but I'm a, a a Gen Xer, and so Cabbage Patch Kids came out, right? Like when I was, and so they didn't have
Yeah.
money to buy the real one, but my grandmother made like a fake one, instead. And so it was just things like that. So for me, if I wanted anything extra, I needed to buy it. So I started working at 11. But it was also
What?
because work for me was
Wait.
a place that, like, I
Yeah.
could be a superstar. I could control how I performed and my work ethic and all
Mm.
those things.
Yeah.
So I've done well from a career perspective. I uh, I skipped a couple grades. So I graduated early, went to university, and worked at a bank while I was in university.
You said you skipped a couple grades.
Yeah, yeah.
How'd you do that?
It's funny because sometimes I'm like, wow, like, where did the brains come from? Because I don't actually think my biological parents, but I do know my biological, like, grandmother and aunts. There's a couple real smart ones in there, so I do think that's, it's probably somewhere in my DNA. But yeah, my mom was amazing at, like, pushing hard for me. So I was in gifted programs that never really challenged me, and then finally they tested me, and I was testing 5, 6 grade levels higher. And so I skipped 2 grades.
How
Yeah.
you don't know where that comes from? You
Well,
just had
I
like
just know
a.
that Julie did not make very smart choices, but I do know that she's one of 4 girls, and one of them's either a psychologist or psychiatrist who used to work for Betty Ford
Mm-hmm.
Clinic, and the other one is a university professor. So there's smarts that run in the biological side of the family. I just think Julie didn't choose a good path. So it's likely it comes from there. I have no clue, again, on my biological father's side. And my mom was, a woman who always pushed. I remember when I was 11, she said to me, she said, "Tori, you need to do better than us." And she meant more from a vocation standpoint and
Your
socioeconomically.
adopted mom.
Yes. So just, Julie is bio mom and dad are the people that
Julie
raised
is
me.
by mom.
Yeah.
Okay,
So I
so
never refer
your
to
bio
Julie,
mom, you call her as
a
Julie.
Julie. Yeah,
Yeah.
she doesn't deserve the title. She didn't earn the title of being my mother. So she was the
Yeah, too bad.
biological mother. And so my mom was a secretary and my dad was a janitor. So, they pushed me hard, but But again, they didn't like, or my mom, my dad was somewhat to the side, a little less like a little more absent. But my mom would push me to make sure I did well in school, even though yes, I was gifted, but she wanted me to do as well as possible so I could go far and wide. I wanted to be a lawyer when I was a kid. That was always going to be the plan. And so, but for me, she didn't need to tell me that because I knew I'm like, I'm going to prove that to the Julie side of the family, like I'm going to be better than that biology and I'm going to be better than the circumstance that I'm
Mm.
raised in. And so for me, I started working very early, performed exceptionally well. I got promoted by 14. I was the assistant manager of the shoe store I worked at. Um, and then I graduated at 16, went off to
You said
university.
at 14.
I was the assistant
You said
manager of
at
the shoe
14
store, which
you're
is
an assistant
yeah, it was a bit odd because I had people who were like 20 years
man.
older than me who, I was like
Yeah,
their
that's
manager.
crazy.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, so I do think I've
You just have
achieved.
like I feel like you have just like a gift. You have a
Um,
gift.
I think a
Or
lot
do you
has to
think
do
it's
with
just your work
mindset.
ethic?
I've I've been fortunate. To, be blessed with some smarts that helps for sure, but a big part of what I attribute the career success to is much more around one, the resilience I've built. You need to be, and I've been now a part of in the corporate world close to 40 merger acquisition or related transactions, 19 or 20 of them for the companies I worked for, two companies I bought myself, and then the others in supporting clients on, their journey. And that comes with lots of challenges. So being resilient has helped me in business, but also performing. So I, developed the was educated, developed the skills, learned what was how the company I worked for measured success and performed well. I also have a very, very high degree of like strong work ethic. I've never not worked multiple jobs or had, even as an executive, I always have a side hustle.
Uh,
So all of that's allowed me to be successful. I've had some failures as a leader. I think I showed up at some point as a bit of a hard ass, like with no emotion, in part because I was so a young
I
female
feel like you
executive.
I feel like you gotta be like that sometimes.
You do, but I think so. I became
You also have to be compassionate.
very much so, and I think
Yeah.
I became an executive at age 24. So I became the chief operating officer for a large, like outsourcing company, and
Yeah.
so there was. I don't love the phrase imposter syndrome, but it's probably a good way of
Uh,
describing it. But I had my insecurities that were deeply, rooted in my childhood. To now the fact that I was a 24-year-old, so the youngest executive by at least a couple decades. I was the only woman, a new mother too. So like I was also stepping into a very big role as I was stepping into motherhood. And by the way, I'm part of the LGBT community. I was married to a woman before now being married to my husband. So at the
uh.
time, queer, 20 something year old female executive. So I felt like I couldn't show any vulnerability or any emotions. And so when I showed up into that role, I was like, all business all the time, going to wear this mask for you. And so I got a nickname as the Iron Maiden. I found out a couple years later. And so,
Oh.
so that's an area where I was not successful and I had to learn to,
You
show
weren't
up
proud
very
of that
differently.
title?
Um, when I first heard it, I was like, oh, Uh,
Yeah.
but, uh, but then actually something happened
It's
a
like,
couple
yeah, I'm the Iron Maiden.
well, but something happened a couple months later, again, like just a conversation with a colleague, and I realized it was more like it's just so not me because my best friend has nicknamed me Turtle and not my pace. I run so hard, so fast. But what she means
Yeah.
by calling me turtle is that I have this very tough shell exterior. I can handle a lot. Again, going back to the resilience, but
Uh,
inside I'm
you have a
very
turtle shell.
soft and marshmallowy. And so I needed to let the turtle out, so to speak. So I've evolved from the Iron Maiden, into the very different whole human leader, aka the turtle. So my evolution.
Why do you think you chose that path instead? Because have you ever heard of the story of the two brothers that are both raised by a drunk alcoholic, and one brother becomes a successful businessman, and the other brother becomes a drunk alcoholic as well? Have you ever heard of that?
Uh, I
Or
haven't heard
something
of that
similar
one
to that?
specifically, but I've heard many stories, and so I think again, some of it I believe is mindset in this.
Yeah,
I
where do you think you
do.
got that though? Like you.
I don't
We're
know. Again, I do think there's something in my DNA. Like I'm just naturally
a resilient
I'm a
DNA.
fighter. I'm a fighter. I always have been. And so um I, I think a lot has to do with DNA, but I do think like resilience is a bit like a muscle. You can build it over time. And so for me, I had to learn because I don't think I was resilient, but I wouldn't say it was always healthy. So putting walls up around myself to protect myself, never talking like about feelings and emotions and things like that. That's not actually healthy to compartmentalize and never process those things. So I had to learn how to
I can relate.
be better in being able to deal in a healthy way, be resilient. And so a lot of that came down to being very self aware and self reflective of when obstacles or adversity or even processing the old stuff, like why I would act in a certain way. And so I needed to think about that. And then I needed to start to build, I use a phrase a lot, strategic intentionality. So I needed to, be very
Mm,
strategic and intentional about the way I thought, the way I acted, and building, a plan for the goals and objectives that, I had set for myself. And so I think that's what helped, but also with mindset, like no victim mentality here. So I said I signed my social media post with unstoppable. The other one's no excuses. And that's because you have a choice in terms of how you're going to move forward. And so for those two
yeah.
brothers, there was a choice, and one chose one path and one chose the other.
I feel like you had to grow up really fast. Did you feel a pressure to when you were going through your teen years and starting work? Did you feel any sort of pressure to grow up fast?
Um, I think my first 4 years with Julie made me grow up faster, for sure. But also, there were a multitude of things. I mean, I was an only child, so I spent a lot of my time talking to adults. I'm only 5'8", but I hit this height by the time I was maybe 11. So if you look at all of my school photos, class photos, the middle back row is me, the tallest person, right there. By 10 years old, I was taller than my teacher. So I have this like big person mentality, even though again I'm not. I think for a woman, like I'm tall, but like not super tall. But so that to starting work at 11, I worked in a hair salon. And so all I was dealing with were adults around me. So all of that caused me to grow up definitely much more quickly. And even to skipping 2 grades. By the way, that was the first time I finally like evened out size wise with everyone. When I started high school 2 years, 2 years younger than everyone. But finally I'm like, wow, I'm the same size.
See, I'm the opposite. I was always the tiniest.
Uh,
So it's like I felt like less than everybody because I was the tiniest.
yeah.
So I had to build resilience through that, I guess,
Yeah.
growing up. Um, but it's very interesting to see how you chose that path of resilience versus you don't think anybody played a role in that besides your biology and or it was
I
just
mean, my mom encouraged me, again to do
mm,
better than them. And she pushed me hard. So again, I was gifted. I didn't really have to study. Like I'm very fortunate. It came very easily to me.
just everything just
Uh, but sh-
clicked.
but she still pushed me to be the best version of myself. And so I
Mm,
do think she was a big part of that. Although I moved out of the house when I went to university, like in my first year of university. So I was 17 years old and I moved out. And so I've been supporting myself. But I saw like I saw whether it's watching the TV shows my mom watched on television and aspiring to see the families, the family dynamic. So I always knew I was going to
mm,
have more than one child, right? I didn't want to be an only child. So I had this wonderful vision of what I thought, dramatized version of what I thought a great family was without having a great experience myself. Like my adoptive dad's not an amazing human being. My mom was. And so I idealized and created both for family, but then also in creating the life that I wanted to have that was very different than my family. So that is a big part of what shaped me. I was like, again, I envisioned what success looked like for me, both personally and professionally. and I set a goal to achieve it. And as I said, I'm very goal driven. Nothing's stopping me. And so that mindset has helped me achieve. You know, but and I do. You asked at the beginning of the, our session here, like around success. I do. I mean, did I fumble
Mm-hmm.
along the way? Yeah, I had one failed marriage. Well, my choice, my choice. I chose to, have something different, and and I have
Yeah.
two great human beings that I've raised, and so I'm happy and feel I've achieved success in my personal life, and then professionally, I have as well. I'm still on a journey. There's so much more I want to accomplish, but I'm still quite happy with where I am today.
I think that's why you've been able to accomplish so much is because you really took like manifestation, like you like embody manifestation, I think, because when you say you envisioned it, you visualize it, you already seen it coming a reality, and all you had to do was put in the work. And I think that's a lot of people struggle with
Yeah,
that.
and yeah, they do. I went, we're at the beginning of 2024, and so there's lots of people making New Year's resolutions and things like that. I belong to this women's executive group, and a bunch of us are pretty close in that group. We went and they had this session for like vision boarding. And I said, "Look, I don't need the visuals. So I envision what I want, but I don't need to physically see it on a board in front of me." I'm like, so actually I joked with them. I'm like, "Can I just come and drink the wine and not do the vision board?" And we all, got
Yeah.
together. But I am very much that way. Like
You see
I
it.
do envision where I want to be, what I want to achieve, and what steps am I going to take to get there, and then I just do it.
Mm-hmm. I feel like this stuff just comes naturally to you. Do you feel that way, or do you feel
um,
like you really gotta?
well, I mean, if I were to tell you like the lots of
Mm-hmm.
further adversity and obstacles come my way, it's just I choose to not
Mm-hmm.
let them stop me.
You don't choose
And
victimhood.
um, not at all. Like not
Yeah.
at all. And I also take accountability. That I do think that that's something really important. So where there's many things that are out of our control for sure, but there's many things that are just going to happen. Again, particularly when I think of from a work perspective. So I
Mm-hmm.
left. I'm in transition right now, with in pipeline for a few other executive roles, but I made a decision to leave my last company, and I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't super happy. It was not
Mm-hmm.
a good company. People will be looking up on LinkedIn. So I want to be clear. It just wasn't a fit for me, in terms of the way I
Yeah.
lead. And I evaluated my last 5 or 6 years, and I'm like, there's something about the two companies I worked with, over that time frame. And, and, so I can't blame the company solely for that. Now, are there things within each of them that I think they need to fix? Yes. But I looked inward and take accountability. What is it
Mm.
about me? What do I enjoy? So I try and live by the 80-20 rule. And if from a work
Mm.
perspective, 80% of the time, I've got to enjoy what I'm doing. There's always going to be the 20% of just stuff that
Oh
happens
yeah.
or administrative
Yeah.
stuff you have to do. That's fine. But I've chosen to not do things personally or professionally that don't bring me personal or professional joy or value.
Fulfillment.
I'll say no. I
Yeah.
delegate, I outsource. And so but that is an inward reflection again for me on what so in taking accountability for decisions I've made for career choices or other choices. So I think it's a combination of like focus and achievement, but also accountability when things don't work out and figuring out how to get back to the right path.
Mm-hmm. How do you think you've found what you really want to do?
Uh, I did actually discover very early. I had plans on being a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was in university, I said I worked in a bank, in their call center. I got promoted up through the ranks fairly quickly, and I'd already been now a people leader since I was 14. But I realized I loved the business world, the corporate environment I was in. So that combined with being a leader, I realized like this is something I'm passionate about. And so then I made a decision. I never went to law school. I stayed in the corporate world. And actually when I took that first executive role, I moved out of banking into the world of business to business. professional services.
Mm,
And that's where I've stayed, the majority of the rest of my career, because it creates this extra level of complexity, because you have a customer or client, like a client that you serve, and then you're either supporting their employees or their customers. Plus you have your
mm,
shareholders, you have your bosses, like you've got, so I love it. So that's what I found brings me joy. So I can very clearly articulate that I like to develop the strategy for our business and how we go to market, to our customers or clients, the way in which I want to lead a team. And I'm maniacally focused. That's a big part of for me around
maniacally focused.
the right kind of culture and leadership. And
Yeah.
so for me, one of the reasons I didn't enjoy, the place I was in my last company, very senior executive, but I was still expected to be a very, like, a highly billable consultant, like doing a very significant portion of individual contributor work. That's not what I want to be doing. I want to be,
Yeah.
again, strategy through execution and leading teams to do that. I don't want to be the one
Yeah.
I roll up my sleeves and I jump in when we need to, but I don't want that to be 50% of my job. So hence the reason I'm no longer at my last employer.
Yeah, don't I always tell people don't be afraid to quit. I mean, you have to have some sort of plan before you quit, but I don't know. I'm a big proponent of your own peace, happiness, and fulfillment versus doing something you hate or just for the paycheck or any of that. Like I'm grateful that I get to do this, even though I don't get paid for it. I could do this for as long as I can. That's why I started a podcast because I find it very fulfilling, and I think everyone does deserve that. Everyone deserves to find something that they can do forever that's fulfilling as work, I think. Because I mean, when you think about it, you spend how long at work? You spend more time at work than you do at home sometimes. So, if you can find something that you at least enjoy and find fulfilling, might as well take that risk. But what is your because you say you've been in corporate for a while now. How have you dealt with the inequalities, the whole, um, what's it called? Woman, I forget the term.
Well,
Uh,
there's an equity period for across the board for, and not just women. So I am
woman activism. What is it called? You know
empowerment.
what I'm saying?
Yeah.
No, no.
Equality. I don't know. It's
The woman, like, the females that are, they want more equality. There's a term for it. Uh, like they're promoting like the matriarchy versus the patriarchy type. I forget the
like
term for it.
feminist, you mean?
There you go.
I
Yeah, how was your
well,
experience with dealing with that?
so I am a massive, massive advocate around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and not just for women. The
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I spent a lot of time focused, yes, around the advancement of women. So most companies, larger companies, will have what are called employee or business resource groups, and they're different clusters of people that are usually from marginalized communities or underrepresented communities, whether it's women, the LGBT community, whether it's African Americans, whether it's our Jewish, whatever, all the various elements of like diversity, neurodiversity, those kinds of things. So I'm a massive advocate for that. I believe that workplaces and communities in the world is better when they are more diverse and more inclusive. And with that, comes equity and equality. And so, what I am still
Mm.
saddened by, Thomas, is, I became an executive almost 24 years ago. So, I'll be 48 later this year. Um, and the needle hasn't moved like as far as it needs to. When you look at the
Yeah.
Fortune 500 companies, so 500 largest publicly traded companies, only
Mm-hmm.
10% of the CEOs are women. And I haven't seen the new
Mm.
2024 data come out, but for 2023, we entered 2023 with only 6 Black CEOs, one of whom was also a female and
Mm.
she retired. And so, like, that to me, that disappoints me. And what I believe is that, so we don't just need to create a vision for a more diversity and greater equity and inclusion. Like, we need to take significant action in moving us forward. And it's not just the people from those marginalized communities who need to do it. Although yes, I'm a queer woman, I have great privilege. I am born in North America and I am white. And so I have privilege over many others. And I also now have a platform because I'm an executive. I do public speaking. I'm in the media all the time. I have a large followership across my social channels and beyond. So I believe I need to be, let's say, the ally to the Black community. Here we are in Black History Month to do
Yeah.
more, to lift as we rise. So for me, I'm very, very going back to strategic intentionality around creating a better, like, diverse and inclusive workplace for all.
Is there any specific um, story or experience that you've dealt with directly dealing with that you weren't happy with?
For sure. So I one, when I was married to my wife, and I've always been out like quite open around my sexuality. I was,
Yeah.
however, caught, like, so anyone who worked with me would know, and she would come to events. I was somewhat guarded with our clients, although now I'm an open book. You Google me, like, it's all out there. I won an award for, like, the top LGBT out executive role models. When I was at IBM, I was one of 30 out executives globally. So I'm very, very out.
Yeah.
Even especially now, again, now I'm married to a man, but I'm still believe, it's my position to advocate for. And I also have, one of my 2 children is trans. So my younger one is a trans male. Um, so
Oh wow.
I had an experience in my late 20s where I was in a role where I was leading all of our major client relationships for one company. And the salesperson that had originally brought in this very large client of ours is a Mormon. And he was not supportive of
Mm.
my lifestyle and absolute was rude and discriminatory and tried to block me from going to, like, our clients' quarterly review meetings or annual review meeting. Well, so he sold it, but now I'm accountable for delivering all of this, my team delivering all of the services. Yes, I need to be in the meeting. And so that, meant, some, advocating for myself, and, working with, our CEO to make sure that it was. So, I mean, that was one, just, that I felt, and there's been many, many others as a woman. In fact, what I think is unfair, a strong woman like myself, will be labeled the B word, or be told, that I'm aggressive, versus my male counterparts are applauded and told they're assertive. So it's just even like language like that matters.
Yeah, because you're just seen differently as a woman in the corporate world, and they feel like I've never worked in corporate, but you hear so many stories of like women doing the same job, but they're not paid the same, or they're not treated equally, or like you said, it was like a glass ceiling. Is that the right term? Where people try
Yeah.
to block you from success, or they block you from growth for whatever selfish reasons. I don't understand why people do that. um I honestly don't understand why people do that. um why do you think people do that?
Um, well, I think it happens for a few reasons. I do think, and this will be controversial for your female listeners, but I do think women hold themselves back in many regards,
Mm.
and for a few reasons. So one, there is data that shows that women will not apply for a role if they don't believe they meet like almost all of the criteria that's listed. So if there's 10 listed, they have to, meet like 8 or 9 or 10 of 10.
Oh, I see.
Men
Yeah.
apply at like 5 or 6, right? So there's just a confidence level, and so I think,
Or
women
even
need
just
to
like one or
believe
two.
more.
Yeah.
Women need to believe
Yeah.
more in themselves, but I also, they take on more of the family and household duties and responsibilities generally. So I'm like, well, find yourself a partner who's going to be an equal partner in your household responsibilities. If you choose to have children, that like you should not be the primary earner. Like you're in a partnership here, and get help. So to come in. So if your partner wants to also continue to work, so like then bring in caregivers. Maybe you've got family members around. That was never an option for me, but so I do think women, they put themselves on the sidelines sometimes, and in like the really really critical part of their career. And the other thing, and this is more attributed to others around them, going back to diversity, people hire people that are familiar to them. And so many of these right now, again, I'm just going to reference the data points of the Fortune 500, are white men. And so they look around, who do I know, when I know that there's a opportunity within, like to hire an executive within. And so they hire people that they know and look like them, because they haven't, again, opened generally up to this, richness. So I see, people putting, and now don't get me wrong, people do business with people they like and trust. And so that's a trust, and therefore they want to do business with. And so, the need to open the aperture to different people. And so I think that's where some of it comes as well. And go back to even just the language and the way, people are viewed. I mean, I look, so let's go on the smaller scale. Venture capital only, and actually I think for 2023 it was even less, but the data point previously was only 4% of venture capital funding. So people who want to do startups would go to women.
Yeah.
Why?
Wow.
And so that's where I think there's work to be done in terms of male allies and supporting women. But also I think women need to help themselves in not putting themselves on the sideline, not letting anything preventing them from, getting where they want to get to, and having greater confidence in their own skills and abilities.
Um, I think, yeah, I think, I don't know. I think it's the overall narrative that women are told at a young age. You know, it's everywhere. It's like subliminal. You know, you see, I don't know, cartoons, movies, Disney, all these like subconsciously, you're subconsciously taking it in, but then when you show up in the real world, it's a narrative that's told, and most, not just women, but a lot of people, they don't realize it. So yeah, I don't know where I was going with this, but I do think I do think women need to be brave in that sort. And I did want to ask you, how do you balance the family life? Because it is seen like, oh, like the woman, like in a traditional sense, like the woman should stay home, cook, clean, change diapers,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you're a woman of both sides. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, I've never been that woman. Yes, I gave birth to 2 children, but um, I so one, I think culture needs to dispel. Like I get it. Biologically, we are, growing these babies inside us, and we're birthing these babies.
Nurturing,
But there's no reason that two parents of whatever sexuality they are, like, shouldn't be equal partners in raising those
like an
children.
expectation.
And so
Yeah.
for me, I never put my career on hold. When I had my first son, and I'm originally from Canada, so their maternity leave policies are much better than, for us here in the US. But when I had him, it was 6 months. It then moved to a year maternity leave. I only took 3 months. It was my first. I didn't even know. I was like, am I going to want it all? One, he was a really good baby, but two, I was just really eager to get back to work. So I only took 3 months. And when I had my second, I didn't take any. Now, I will my ex-wife had cancer. We first time she had cancer was when I was pregnant with my youngest. So she was home like with treatment. So one of us needed to be working, but also she was home with some help to help with the kids at that point. So I took like no, I worked from home the first 2 weeks and then I went back. And that was but I do want to say that's my choice. I honor and respect women's choice, whether they want to take full maternity leave or stay at home for a period of time. That doesn't work for me. I love what I
Mm.
do, and I was not prepared to put myself on the sidelines career wise. And so
Yeah.
I am very fortunate. My ex wife, who unfortunately passed away from another round of cancer 10 years ago now, um,
Oh
um,
wow.
she was an incredible like partner in our duties, and but she also had a job. She was a general contractor, so we had a nanny who helped out. So we had support, and when we lived close to her mom used to help with the kids. And then my husband now, amazing man. You know, he was at the top of his career food chain. And when we met, we lived in different cities. So he gave up a 25-year career to move for me, to adopt my children, step
Oh wow.
in as like their stepdad and caregiver, and makes my world really possible. So I'd say to women, find a partner that supports you in your career and get help where you need it, family or outsource it to allow you to do. And then what I would also say is, recognize you're going to need to make compromise and trade offs. I actually don't love the question, how do you do it all? The reality is, I have a saying, where there's conviction, there is capacity. So you make time for the things that are meaningful for you. Means you're not Netflixing all night, right? Like, so for me, I would try and come home, have dinner with the kids when they were younger, put them to bed, and then I hop back on my computer for a couple of hours. So that's how I did it. But also, there's times, again, you're compromise and trade offs. You know, when my younger one was only 2 years old, I remember that year I spent 220 days on the road traveling for work. That's how many business days there are. So, one, I didn't even take vacation that year, it seemed. And I was always on the road. But when my ex-wife passed away, and we were divorced at that point, but she would have the kids when I traveled for work. Um, and I have no family. So when she passed away, I had a choice to make career wise. I couldn't, I was about 50 to 70% travel at that point for work. That wasn't going to be sustainable. So I quit a job I loved. I tried for 6 months to find a role within that company. I was working for American Express at the time. I was trying to find a role that would allow me to not be on the road that much. And it just wasn't possible at the time. So after 6 months, I quit a job I loved to go to a Toronto based role, which is where home had been with my ex wife and the kids, for a job that didn't have me on the road all the time. So that was the compromise and the trade off I made. I made some when they were for work at some point, and in this case, I made the one that was right for my family. And so for women, I'd say get great partners, great support. Don't feel the mom guilt. You're like, don't let anyone put it on you. You're going to feel it yourself. Like I felt guilty at times, but I just didn't let anyone else make me feel guilty for it. And you know, where there's conviction, there's capacity. Think about that and make bold choices over where you're going to spend your time.
That's a really good mantra. Where there's conviction, there's capacity. Because if it's important enough to you, you'll either choose to do the work, even though sometimes the work isn't always fulfilling or fun. Um, and you'll choose to either do that or you'll choose to make an excuse
Right.
and Netflix and chill instead of put in those couple
Yes.
more hours, even if it's just like 1 hour. That 1 hour doing that work that you enjoy is better spent than that 1 hour of an episode of Game of Thrones or something.
Oh yeah. I was a Game of Thrones girl. I watched it. I watched it. But again, it's you have choice. Like so the
Yeah.
big one that gets me is people who say, "Oh, I don't have time to exercise," and I call BS on that.
Oh
BS
man.
on that. You know, so it means you make
Do
choices.
you read?
I
Do you read?
now do almost exclusively audiobook. I'm an avid
Same.
reader.
Yeah.
I'm almost a speed reader, so I can get through books really quickly. But
What?
but I listen to audiobooks now mostly.
I started this recent self-help book by Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Oh,
It's called It's called Be Useful.
I
And
listened to
he
it.
Oh, you listened to that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, he in one of his chapters about work, like work your ass off. He explains like just think like you have to sit down and break down your day and see any gaps in time you could where you have that choice where it's like okay, you could either relax and go watch Netflix, or you have that choice to do the work that you're passionate and ambitious about, you know, even if it's just an hour or 30 minutes, that work consistently applied every day, it compounds. um and if you keep it up every day, you know, people don't realize how much they can accomplish if they're consistent, because I believe consistency does compound, but people don't ever reach that point of compounded growth. They usually give up. Where do you think you find that conviction at? Where do you have that like how do you have that conviction? When do you ever feel discouraged? What do you do when you feel discouraged?
Um, so I do feel I should, I mean, if we've talked here, I'm exceptionally resilient and like go getter attitude. I do. I want your listeners to know there's still many times I feel down. I'm discouraged. I have a big old cry. So that definitely happens. But that's actually a big part of the process I work through. I allow myself to feel that way, but not for too long. Right. I sit in the
Yeah.
emotions and have them, but then going back to you have a choice then. How are you going to move forward? Um, so for me, that like, when disappointment comes my way, and actually, super transparent. So I told you I made a decision to leave my last company. Was able to negotiate a good exit, which is great, and did that without another job to go to. Now I had been looking, and I thought I was going to be stepping into another job very, very quickly, and I think things happen for a reason, and that one didn't work out. And this is the first time in my life I've ever really had to be intentional around looking for a job. I'm used to being recruited. And I knew at my level at the C suite, it's going to take a very long time. And I've had huge moments of discouragement where I'm like, what the heck is going on here? Like this, I still tend to very much equate what I do as like it is such a huge part of my identity. So I've been discouraged
Mm.
many times. My poor husband has had to like, be the shoulder for me to cry on, both literally and figuratively many times. And then it's like, okay, let's shake this off. Got it. Feeling a bit sorry for myself right now, and we're going to move forward. It's continuing. So much about job searching is about networking and connecting with others, particularly at this level. So it's like back at it, like get out there. There's a book by Keith Ferrazzi called Never Eat Alone. It's this great book on networking. My husband jokes. I've always been an avid networker, but he jokes that it's always eat alone for him because I'm out. I'm engaging and meeting with other people, and so
Uh,
that's I've been discouraged. I feel the emotion and I get back on track with the like intentional plan I have in terms of how do we move forward and achieving my goal and objective.
I feel like we have the same process. It's kind of crazy. It's like I'm the same way. Like I always tell people, my family and friends think I'm like cold and like too stoic and that I don't have emotions sometimes. I'm like robotic. But I think over time you do compartmentalize those emotions, but then you also have to give yourself that grace to process them, because I believe people who just push it down and never fully process them, that turns into like a form of trauma or victimization or excuse to not do anything, because you're holding on to it and you never fully processed it or allowed yourself to feel it. And that's something I had to learn, just through various relationships. And yeah, and I think it manifests either way. I think something is going to manifest either way, If whether you hold on to it, it's going to manifest in a, whether it's your health. I've had somebody else come on that he was a workaholic and he was working his ass off, and his body, he never took time to process emotions, and his body developed bone cancer because of that.
Mm.
And it wasn't until he switched his mindset and allowed himself to feel emotions and feel everything and visualize and start to meditate and do all kinds of practicing self-love and self-compassion that he beat bone cancer within a year. So I think people take their mindset for granted. They don't, they think like, oh no, I can't just think my way into it. But have you ever heard of Joe Dispenza?
No, I haven't.
He breaks down the mind in a way that is both scientific and spiritual. If you ever have the time, look, he has a lot of books out and podcasts, but he breaks it down for the people who are like too analytical about stuff and overthinkers. But he pretty much breaks down like spirituality as a science, and that you can literally think your way out of like anything in life that you're going through. You can think your way out of it. But I did want to ask you another controversial question,
Okay.
because you're in this world of corporate life and family life. What is your take on traditional gender roles?
I don't think there. Sorry, there have been for like decades and decades traditional roles, but I don't think there are gender roles. I think there's
Yeah,
work to be accomplished at home and in the work world that can be accomplished by either gender, and and those who are fluid now, let's say, given all the different gender identities.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I do not subscribe to um, traditional roles of any sort. Nor actually, I also really hate when people talk about behavioral traits as being, you know, more masculine or feminine. And so they have been stereotyped that way for much of our lives
So the
and
stay at
before.
home dad.
Um, the um, so I so someone makes a choice to do that, great. Who
Yeah.
like, so for me, I don't, I like I said, I do not subscribe to like
Do you
gender
think they're seen as
roles.
less
Um,
masculine if they're a stay at home dad, to being the main caregiver
um,
versus the
well,
woman that's like the breadwinner?
I think society, some people will. So they still, again, subscribe to these stereotypes and the way it's
Narratives.
always
Yeah.
been. And so
Mm.
I don't, so I have a stay at home husband now, but he also he made a choice. Now he was the top of his
Yeah.
food chain. He used to teach massage therapy, but he was the top of his food chain for 25 years. And he gave it up
Yeah.
to move for me because we were in different cities. And it didn't make, I'm the primary earner. I've always been the primary earner in my relationships, whether with a man or a woman. And he made the
Yeah.
choice to do that. But like, and now he's super
Do you
comfortable in
see
his
him
masculinity.
any different? Do you see him any differently, or you see him the
Not
same?
at all. Not at all. I think, he's
Yeah.
super like confident in his own masculinity, but I can tell you like he had friends who like question like, "Oh, and you're just going to stay home?" And it was,
Yeah.
although they were kind
Yep.
of like, "Oh, they were kind of like, "Oh, you lucked out, right? Like you got a sugar mama or what?" Like that kind of thing. But he was actually doing the heavy lifting at home. Like he was taking the kids to
Yeah.
and from school, and he's making us
I think
dinners,
people
he's doing the
take that
laundry.
like they don't. Yeah, they don't see that as value. I think a lot of people don't see
I
that
see
as
it as
value, but it has so much.
I think
Yeah.
that's it's a partnership. If you choose to be partnered, choose to have children, there's responsibilities that come with a household and with raising children. And I hope that you as partners determine what that right mix is. And maybe it's 50-50. Maybe it's 70-30 in terms of household responsibilities. Maybe again, you bring in a nanny or a housekeeper to help share those, right? So I just find what works well. I just don't think it should be imposed on one or the other, and particularly not because of gender.
Expected, yeah. Yeah, because you have these societal expectations. Like, I mean, it was most prominent, what, during the last century. All the men would go to war, and the woman would stay home and take care of the family. Um, but yeah, I think I agree with you. I think men, if you choose to be a stay-at-home dad, uh, I don't think you should care what other people think of you, as long as you have a supportive partner, you know, because it just goes down to that. I don't know if you've ever heard of like red pill society, red pill culture.
Mm. I
It,
have. I don't
it's like
understand it
toxic
well, but I have heard of it.
masculinity, the
Mm.
whole like Andrew Tate's and that
Mm.
the most googled man on Google, as he claims. But
Oh,
it's like that whole society is, it's like he explains like we do have gender roles, and that, you know, if you want to be a successful respected man, you have to work on your ambitions. And I don't know, I think that takes away, because I believe no matter your gender, you could be very ambitious and successful in your own right. And I think when you have a family, you just have to figure out that dynamic as you move along, because I've struggled with that personally. I'm a single father now. Ex is dealing with alcoholism, not really in the my daughter's picture. So I'm like everything right now. Like the the mom, dad, caregiver, trying to work too. It's like I'm literally everything, and it's hard
yes.
sometimes, but you gotta, I don't know, if you really want to achieve something, you have to do the work regardless of your circumstances.
You do.
So what are your plans for the future?
So I my husband joked once shortly after he met me that, I'm not the type who's ever going to retire, which is probably pretty true.
I
So,
don't believe
but
in retirement.
no,
I don't believe in I
I
don't
don't.
believe in retirement.
So for me, I see, probably another 15 years at the C-suite running businesses. I do have side hustles. I said earlier, like I've always maintained side hustles. So I what it's called is a portfolio career for people when they retire traditionally, but then they're doing other things. So I have it already to some extent. So I'm a public speaker and I do lots of media appearances. I'm an author. I do a little bit of coaching and a little bit of consulting, but I do those by choice. And so I have another 15 years where I'm going to lead at the C-suite and do that on a very small scale. And then when I decide to retire from the big corporate, it just means that I will then, and I forgot to mention the board work that I do. I will do that portfolio career that maybe is 20% now will grow to be 50 or 60%, and I'll create capacity for myself to do other things. So, what I see for myself now is, as I said, I'm in career transition, but, within the next couple of months to, land somewhere, continue the work I do in speaking and on the boards. But on the personal front, so my husband's my person. Like if anything ever happened to him, I'm not sure I would want to ever get remarried. Like he's that amazing. So, but I have two amazing human beings who I've told one, if not both of them, they need to make me a grandmother. However, I was a young mother by choice. I'm like, let's not make me a young grandmother by
How
accident.
old were you?
So like,
How old were you
so
when you
I
had
was,
them?
I was just shy of my 24th birthday, like 6 weeks before I turned 24 when I had my first son, and then 4 years later came my younger one.
I was 24 when I had. Well, I was literally just shy of 24 too. I was 23 and a half when I had
Yeah.
my twins. I have twins.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, 23, young, young, but I was this. We were the same. We were like, we were young. we
Yeah.
we had stability. We were healthy. Um, but I was just like, whatever.
Yeah.
It was a choice. But were you say? Didn't you have more to say or no? You were done
About oh well, yeah, no, about where
about
for me
yeah, your
the
plans.
I know success will be I'll land another C-suite role and do more work. I'm still looking for. I had to give up my one of my board seats. I'd been on for 6 years, so it was just kind of time. So I'm looking for another board. I sit on one not for profit called helpusadopt.org. So I tend to do one not for profit and then one for profit. So I'm looking for my next for profit board and my C-suite gig, and then I'll be a grandmother someday, and I'll probably my husband and I were think about a second home, maybe in Europe somewhere. So that could be something. So there's lots of good stuff. But again, I feel like I'm at a good spot where I've chosen to eliminate the things in my life that don't bring me that joy and passion. So pretty much
Yeah,
everything I do does. I'm a fitness fanatic. We work out 6 days a week. We've got great
same.
friends. We travel a lot. We're foodies.
Yeah.
We enjoy good wine. So like I have a very full life.
No, that's. I mean, yeah. I think everyone deserves to have that sort of uh, vibrant life.
Yeah.
And you chose to live a vibrant life. People. I think victimization is a choice, and I think you did not ever choose victimization from a young age, and you chose to live a vibrant life. But I
Very much
have
so.
final questions I ask every guest, and I'm curious to hear your answers.
Yeah.
So, first question: what is your biggest regret in life?
Oh, I live with no regrets. So, so there's not one I can share with you. Even the bad stuff that's happened, it's made me who I am today. So I don't have any.
Next question: who or what has made the biggest impact in your life so far that makes you who you are?
My mom, my adoptive mother. I didn't appreciate it as a teen. Her work with me on getting me to be really self-aware, self-reflective, understand why I felt the way I was feeling, why I was acting the way I was acting. I hated it at the time. She would sit me down for hours, and it drove me nuts. And that it's a big part of the success I have now in terms of the resilience, that sort of multi-process I have to be a healthy level of resilience. Um, she didn't need to, but she always pushed and encouraged me, and she also made it a very safe world for me, because I was very fearful. I remember at one point she said, I think my unhealthy resilience was put walls up, right, so no one can hurt me.
Mm.
And I remember at one point she's just like, she said, Tori, like, we are not going to give you away. Like, I just thought, like, I always felt like something could happen, like, and so she made
Oh
me
wow,
feel safe.
because you were adopted.
She made me feel loved. Yeah. And so she's looking back, like I, I wouldn't be here, like, if it wasn't like, I don't know what Pat, like, would I've gone to the child welfare system? Would Julie have like
Yeah.
beaten me to death? Like, I don't know what would happen. Right. So my mom was like that person for me. Sad that she, passed away 20 years ago now. And so I didn't have her for all
Oh
that,
wow.
like, as long as I could have. And I didn't always appreciate, she also was manic depressive, which made it hard to like be there sometimes,
Mm.
but she did wonders for me.
How when you were a teen and she would sit you down for hours, what were y'all talking about or doing? Because I think that's very, very important for parents to be able to openly express and allow your child to feel their feelings and express themselves and feel safe and heard and listened to. So at the time you didn't like it, but now reflecting in retrospect, how, like, what was it? What was it?
Um, I mean, she would do it with everything. I had far too many like boyfriends. I think, my early years, I equated affection, attention from others as love. And so, even just having her like talk through that with me to just the dynamics with friends. And so it was, yeah, just, I mean, hours and hours. And like I said, I didn't like it at the time. Like, oh, mom, like, can let me go already?
Y'all would
And
just talk through it, just talk about it.
yeah, but it was her just constant push was to go deep in my
Mm.
side. Why are you feeling this way? Where does this come from? Like, let's unpack that. And like I said, I hated it. And I don't think I pulled that skill back out until I was like probably in my like 20s and 30s. Like it was there a little bit. I just wasn't utilizing it as much. And then at some point the light bulb went like, all that stuff she did with me. Like this is really helpful. And then just started to like implement and use it way more frequently.
Yeah, because you probably hated it because you had those walls up and you didn't want to face them, and you were
Yeah.
forced to confront them. Uh, well, next question is, what is one lesson that you learned the hard way?
Um, I talked a little bit about it, and it was more from the leadership journey standpoint, and it had to
Mm.
do with being vulnerable, with being showing emotions, and ultimately being really just being more authentic. Because the reality is, I didn't change; I just hid. Right. So the mask I wore at work, business, I'm going to hide my feelings. I'm going to hide my emotions. I'm going to hide the vulnerabilities, and I'm going to hide all of my lived experience because I don't want to give a reason for anyone to question me and why I'm here and me as a female and all those things. I've always that turtle has always existed there in terms of that softness that existed inside. And so, the advice I'd give like to my 20 something year old self is when I started to realize in my mid to late 20s is that it's okay to be my authentic self, to show up fully, and embrace all the multiple facets and layers, and the way in which I therefore engage and build relationships with people.
Yeah, because you said at that time you were feeling that quote imposter syndrome, and you weren't expressing your true self. How did you feel when you started to really express your true self?
Oh, I mean, it was freeing to do that, and
Yeah,
the dynamics again of the relationships I had changed. I saw like the world sort of open up, both personally and professionally by doing it.
that's good. Everybody deserves to be free in their own right. Next question. What would you want to experience in life if you had infinite time and infinite money?
Oof. Um, I There's very little. I feel I do feel like I said earlier, like I have a very full life.
Yeah,
I It's probably more time for me. It's not money. It's not money. It's, just give me more time with my family, with my friends. More, I've traveled the world a lot for, mostly for business. Um, but, the enjoyment of doing it more so for
for pleasure.
personal pleasure.
Yeah.
I'd like, yeah. Although I feel like I'm making up for that. I've been doing lots of travel over the last number of years for pleasure.
Yeah, I'd love to travel the world as well and still do my podcast while I'm traveling. I think it would make for a great like
Cool.
I guess vlogs or just like cuz my goal and vision for the podcast is to legit like build out a whole studio and just like fly out my guests for like in person um interviews and like I want to actually meet everybody I interview, you know. That's the goal eventually. But
Mm.
yeah, last question. Is there any personal insights that you'd like to share on your journey of discovering yourself that you think would resonate?
I feel like I've shared a lot of kind of the nuggets I tend to leave with people. But I guess,
Yeah.
there's, I tell people like you're the CEO of your life, your career, your personal brand, whatever it is, like you control that. And that goes back to that sort of no excuses, meaning like you have choice. And so I want people to recognize that they do, despite their circumstances, despite their adversity, they can chart their own course. And don't let anyone define that for you, and hold you back from whatever it is you want. And conversely, if you want to be the stay-at-home parent as well, like it's the spectrum is
No
wide.
matter your
Like
gender. No matter
figure
your
out
gender.
what that is.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, how do you before I close out, how do you think you find that course? You know, for people who do feel lost. I mean, have you ever felt lost or do you feel like you've always had that charted direction?
I've never felt lost. However, it's changed over time. So as I said, I wanted to be a lawyer from the time I was probably 10 or 11 years old. Like I declared that that's what I was going to be. And then I found a passion in the business world and I chose to stay
Mm,
there. And so,
yeah.
I tell people to follow their passion, follow their joy. There's this like Japanese philosophy called ikigai, and it's just
Yeah, yeah,
around
yeah.
what
I
you
heard of it.
do, like do
Yeah.
work. You're familiar with it, like what you're good
Yeah.
at, what you can get paid for, or like what the world needs, like these kind of. So like
Yeah.
that's where I encourage people to spend their time. However, we do need to put food on the table. So I'm not saying don't take a job because you need to take a job to put food on the table. Know that you're doing it for a finite period of time until you find the passion. But and then also give yourself permission to pivot and change over time
Yeah.
because we grow. And again, what I wanted as
We
a
grow and
child,
change. Yeah.
and then once I got into the work world, changed my thought process. And so I've just made sure that I've stayed on a path in which I'm doing what challenges me because that is actually something that brings me joy, and the kind of work that I find fulfilling. Even if it's taken me some zigzags. I'm also really comfortable with, as much as I'm strategic and intentional in building a path, I give myself some flexibility to kind of go with the flow as well.
And that's that's liberating and freeing. I think that's literally I always tell people your biggest fears and challenges in life is where you grow and develop as a person. If you don't allow yourself to conquer those fears and embrace fear and change and being uncomfortable, you'll remain where you are. So I encourage everybody who's listening to do what you're afraid of. Get closer to your fears. Try new things if you feel lost, and sometimes follow your intuition and gut because that can guide you sometimes as well. But
Yeah, agree.
Vicky, can I call you Vicky or is it Victoria? Do people call you Vicky?
You can call me Tori Vic V. No, it's the only nickname I don't like. I'm good with
Vicky?
Vic V Tori.
Why don't you like Vicky?
I
Vicky's
don't know. I
icky.
feel like it's I feel like it's yeah, I feel like
It's
it's like a
ick.
stripper name. I don't know. I don't yeah, I just don't like it.
Here comes Vicky. Well, I appreciate you for coming on. Is there anywhere you'd like people to go?
Yeah, sure. I've got a website. It's just my name, victoria-pelletier.com. And people can, link out and connect with me on other social platforms, but on my websites where I've got my books, my keynote talks, some of the other articles that I write, etc. Or Google or find me on LinkedIn. But my website's probably the one-stop shop.
Well, go check her out if you'd like to check her out and see what she's doing and follow her side hustles. And I hope you found some inspiration in this episode. And as always, stay curious and keep going, guys.